Hi, you can call me Crazy Jade. This is my 1991 Subaru Legacy. This was the first generation Subaru Legacy built from 89 to 94. This example is not the best example, but I've slowly been modifying it over the year that I've owned it. What we're going to be talking about today is the 5-speed swap that I just finished. Let's get into it. I don't have too much room here to work with, so there might be quite a few close-ups. I just got done with the 5-speed swap in this, and I've driven it about 600 miles. So that 5-speed swap included the trans, crossmember, driveline, yada yada, a new clutch, and a couple other pieces. I want to go over the parts list, I want to go over the cost, and I will go over concerns that you may have if you were going to do this swap on your own. Now, I took about 4 days by myself to do this, and it wasn't that fun, but it's done now. So let's start with the parts that you will need, that I can tell you off the top of my head that you will need, and I will tell you where I got them and so on. Let's start with the obvious. You're going to need a manual transmission. Now, I went with a 5-speed out of a 92 Legacy sedan, and even though you can go, I believe, with almost any EJ 5-speed, you should, if you're trying to make it a little bit easier and a little more straightforward, you should find one from your year car, at least close in the same generation. This is the automatic that came out of this. I will tell you, these weigh in at around 250 plus pounds with the torque converter fully drained. I just want you to know that, so in case you're trying to take it off the engine by yourself, be prepared, it is super heavy. Now, I did take the pigtails off of this transmission because I know you will need the one to do a little bit of wiring, but I took both just in case. So there are a couple things that I still need to finish and work out about this swap. The first one is that the cruise control does not work, and I will explain that in a little bit. The second one is I don't have a neutral safety switch or a clutch safety switch because I was trying to get the car on the road. But let's talk about a parts list. You will need the manual transmission that you're going to use, the corresponding either clutch cable, if it is a cable type, or master and slave cylinder. I went with pretty much everything that I could off of a 92 Subaru Legacy that was a manual. The final drive ratio in this for the front differential, because this is all-wheel drive, is 411. My car came with a 411 diff, so I did not need to switch that out. However, you will want to make sure that your differential matches the front differential gear ratio. So from there, you will need the starter, the driveline from a manual car because it is just slightly longer, the manual transmission crossmember, the pedal box or pedal assembly that has the clutch and brake pedal, and the shifter linkage to your corresponding transmission. Now, everything that I went with was from a 92 sedan, and the wagon driveline is the same. So if you find a wagon and you have a sedan, or if you have a sedan or if you have a wagon, vice versa, they will work. Now, another question that I had was, what did I do for the gauge cluster? Now, I wanted to keep the mileage that my car had, 197,000, but I didn't want the park, reverse, neutral, drive in the middle. So I had the gauge cluster out of the manual Legacy, and this is actually it. So what I did, and the other car had 130,000 miles, is that the face for this gauge cluster, because if you have a keen eye, this is the older style cluster for the 89 through 91s, and this is the 92 through 94. You can tell by the little round pieces, and I'll show you that there's a couple differences, and that if I turn the key on, the seat belt light is now the ABS light. And this car doesn't have ABS, so it doesn't make a difference. Except, yeah, seatbelt light. So the gauge face on here is held on by 6 screws. 3 of them here, 3 of them here. It includes the temperature gauge and the gas gauge. And what you can do is you can take it off and you can put it onto the other cluster. So 92 gauge face with both the gauges, and this is the face off the automatic. Yes, the manual clusters have this in the middle. It's just the cut open spot for the automatics that you can see it. Now, besides that, my car does not have odometer discrepancy now that I've switched that out, but going into that still, the speedometer cable. I believe that the speedometer cable for the manuals is slightly longer, and I'm using a mechanical speed sensor. So there's a cable, gear driven, down to the side of the transmission, and I just used the auto cable. I think the manual is a little bit longer because it's a little bit of a stretch from the auto one to the manual, but I made it work. Now, pedals. Right there. This is out of a 92 Legacy, and they just bolted right up. So, there's that. Going on the clutch and brake, the clutch. It's the clutch cable from the 92 Legacy parts car that I had. And you should know that if you're going to order a new clutch, and if you're going to do this swap, make sure you have flywheel bolts. Now, I will put the flywheel bolt number up on the screen and probably in the description, and I got them from Subaru. The flex plate and flywheel bolts are the I can't think of it right now, but the one on the automatic and the manual, the bolts are different. And if you're going to get a clutch kit, make sure that you have clutch bolts, because when I ordered my clutch kit for this, it did not have the bolts, so I had to go grab them off of the other clutch for the transmission, for this manual transmission. Now, I don't have the clutch safety switch hooked up because I didn't want to mess with the wiring just yet. But let's talk about wiring. I did the basic wiring that you'll need to do to hook it up. I've removed the key lock module, and I have removed the automatic transmission module. Now, there is one thing about the brake light switch, and if you see those 2 connectors up there, my car, I don't know about, I think this is how all of them are. My car had both those connectors, and one of them seems to be for the manual pedals, and the other one seems to be for the automatic pedal. Now, going from pedals and the cruise control, so to get this running, and that's basically what I did, I had to trick the wiring for the transmission to think that it was in neutral. So the automatic transmission wiring, I had to think that it was I had to trick it to either be in neutral or park so I could start it. And if it's in neutral or park, or think that it's in neutral or park, it will not engage the cruise control because, for obvious reasons. Now, going a little bit back, there's the ECU up here, up there. And you'll see one cut wire. It is a black wire with a white stripe. Now, if you're following a swap guide, that black with white stripe wire is the transmission identifier. It'll be next to two wires that are the same on the end plug, and then it'll be three in technically, so it'll be 1, 2, 3. There is a black wire, a solid black wire, and then there's a black and white wire. The solid black wire is for the mass airflow sensor. Do not cut that one. The black and white wire is the transmission identifier, and I will link the swap guide that I used, but if on your car, if it's not grounded, it needs to be, or if it's grounded, it doesn't need to be. But mine, I was supposed to cut the wire. That's all I know. Let's go under the hood to talk about a little bit of wiring, and then we'll talk about cost. So the transmission and starter, because the automatic starter is different than the manual starter, you will need a manual starter. I got the transmission with the starter and clutch, which I bought a new clutch, off of a 92 sedan. I got the driveline and cross member from a 93 wagon. So, moving to the wiring a little bit, here is the one pin for the transmission, and I believe it is the 4x3 pin. Yes, it is. On the bottom corner, or top corner, however you look at it, there's a black and white and yellow, or black and yellow wire. Those indicate that the car would be in neutral or park. I don't remember exactly which one, so you can start it. So that is why the cruise control won't work. I believe the manual car that I was taking parts from did not have cruise, so I will be figuring that out in another video. So right now, my car doesn't have cruise, and I technically don't have reverse lights because I haven't wired them up to the reverse power and ground off of that switch too. So that'll be in another video covering reverse lights and cruise control. However, I will link, as I said, the swap guide that I used, and on that it tells you in depth, this is what you need to do for cruise, this is what you need to do for the clutch switch and reverse lights. So now moving on to cost. I bought an EFT, which is some weird brand, Stage 1 HD clutch off of Amazon, and when I did a 3-year warranty, and it was $122. It's rated for 240, 250 horse torque. Yeah. That now I believe is $120-ish, and I found that on Amazon. The manual I bought from a guy on Facebook Marketplace, kind of sketchy because the front diff backlash, I had to redo that. That was $100. The Driveline was $90 from a local salvage yard. The cross member was $35. And the odds and ends, the couple of things that I needed. The other thing, bell housing bolts, because they're different length on the auto and manual. I used the one on the side for the auto for the other side, and then went and bought a bolt from a hardware store, and I don't exactly remember what thread it is, but if you take your other bolt in and you just find the right length, you can do it that way. Overall, the cost was right around $500, maybe a little less. So it can be done around that. As I said, there's a couple things. Make sure that you have flywheel bolts, because I didn't. Make sure you have the pressure plate 2 flywheel bolts, because I didn't have those either. I had to go run out and find them again because I threw them away like a dummy. And that's about it. Yeah. I don't think there's anything else. If I missed anything, or if anything you're wondering, drop a comment and I'll try and answer it. The other thing that I forgot that I looked to make sure that I covered, axles. Depending on what transmission you use, there'll either be a male or female end on the corresponding axle. Because I used a 92 legacy transmission, I did not have to change the axles. They're the female end, so you shove a pin through them and they're good to go because that's how the axles work on these cars. Otherwise, if you use a newer 5-speed, you might have to get the corresponding axles from whatever that car or whatever the transmission came out of. I believe that's it. Um, that'll do it. Any questions, any concerns, drop a comment below. I will answer it. Thank you for watching. If you're trying to manual swap your Subaru, it's fairly simple. You just make sure you have the right parts and make sure you will do the proper wiring. That's all I got. Have a good one.